Okay, this is an introduction to summary writing. A summary is a statement comprised of sentences and paragraphs that condenses information and reflects the gist of a larger text, and that is the central idea or the essence. I didn't catch every word between them, but heard enough to get the gist of the conversation. So in a summary, we don't need every word, we just need the gist. There are a couple different types of summaries. Standalone summaries, which is what we're going to learn about in this video. You can use summaries in research papers, and those summaries are shorter. And then you have reviews and abstracts. Here's an example of what a summary looks like. This is for an article called People Like Us by David Brooks from a magazine called The Atlantic Monthly. And we're going to see this again later in the video. We summarize because if we can prove that we're able to understand things we read, and we'll be able to use others' ideas in combination with our own. What makes it difficult is that sometimes we don't know much about the information. There could be difficult words, hard to understand concepts, maybe written poorly, and it might be really long. So these are some of the things we're going to run up against and work through as we learn how to summarize effectively. One thing to keep in mind is that this kind of writing is different from other kinds of writing. Most writing comes from what you want to say, but summary writing is not really what you want to say. It's what someone else wanted to say, and you're telling your readers about that. These ideas have already been thought of, planned out, written by somebody else. We're just summarizing them. So if this woman here wrote something, then we have to remain true to her, what her intentions were, what her ideas were, how she wanted to say things. We can't really comment on what she said or offer our opinion on it. We have to give our readers an accurate summary of her main ideas. How do we do that? The book tells us we can read with the grain and try to see the world through the author's eyes. So we're going to read with the grain, and that will help us summarize her ideas. There's two purposes for summarizing something. One is for yourself as a study aid or to help remember what you read. We already started kind of doing that with our active reading. But then you can also do it for readers, for standalone summary assignments and for research papers and reviews. So we're going to focus in this video and the next one on how to summarize for readers. There's different parts of a standalone summary that I want to talk about today, and you're going to have to include all of these in any summary that you write. The first one is the basic information about the text, author, date, where it was published, and the name of the text. Then the overall main ideas, or I'm sorry, the overall main idea or thesis, which is one thing, one idea, the thesis. So what is the whole text about, basically, in one sentence? Then you need to give the main points, and there could be several of those. In a standalone summary, you want to give some evidence of the main points, not details, but just kind of an explanation of what these main points are about. Signal phrases, Allen and Bacon call these attributive tags, and transitions. So let's look at the basic information in that summary that we saw earlier. Okay, where do you think the basic information is? Well, it would just make sense that you'd put it at the beginning so that the reader would know right off the bat what you're going to be summarizing. So there it is in red. There's his name, the author's name, there's the title, the date, and the publication it came from, a magazine called The Atlantic Monthly. And remember that anytime you're writing the name of a magazine or the name of a newspaper, go in italics, and the name of the article that came from that publication goes in quotation marks. That's why People Like Us is in quotation marks, and The Atlantic Monthly is in italics. All right, basic information. What's next? The thesis. So we have that in blue here. And that goes right after the basic information. We want to let our readers know right off the bat what the text is, who wrote it, all that stuff, and what the thesis is. So that goes right there. Next, we have the main points, and it looks like there's like 4 or 5 in this one. Pretty long text, and a lot of things, a lot of main ideas that David Brooks wanted to hit on. And so the writer of this summary was able to go through and identify those main points, and here they are, and you can see they're dispersed throughout the summary. We have some evidence of the main points, kind of some explanation of the main points, and that comes right after the main points. So this next slide will show you the main points and the evidence together. And as you can see, that makes up the bulk of the whole summary right there. Signal phrases are sprinkled throughout this summary, and a signal phrase is a couple words, and the first word is usually the author, and the second word is some kind of verb telling the reader what the author is doing in their text. So we have David Brooks explores. Um, he begins by stating that. Brooks illustrates. Brooks says. Brooks claims that. He says that. Brooks suggests. So these are signal phrases. And if we don't have these, our reader becomes confused because they think that the ideas that we're writing about came from us when they really didn't. They came from an author. And so we don't want to confuse our readers and make them think that we came up with these ideas. Not only is that confusing for them, but it's also not fair for the author who came up with these ideas. It can be easy to just write a summary and start re-saying the things that the author said as if, they came from our heads, which I guess technically they are in our heads because we read them. Um, but that's not the point of writing a summary. The point of writing a summary is letting our readers know what somebody else said. So we have to use these signal phrases to avoid those problems. We also need to use transitions. Transitions tell our readers how the author organized his or her text. So he begins, lets us know that this information coming up is the first thing that David Brooks said. And then next lets our reader know that this information is the next thing that David Brooks said. And at the very end here, concludes. This lets our readers know that this information is the last thing that David Brooks said, because when we're summarizing, we want to keep the ideas in the order they actually came. One thing that might be a little confusing here is the thesis. We put our thesis here at the beginning before we start going through the article. That's just to help our reader know what the whole text was about before we start breaking it apart into pieces. But, always put your thesis, or always put the author's thesis at the beginning. So this is an example of a standalone summary, like the kind we're going to be writing in this class. Later, we'll be putting summaries in research papers, and those are shorter. They usually take up about a paragraph, and we use them as evidence. So in the next video, we're going to learn how to summarize college texts. Now that we know a little bit about what they are, we're going to go and figure out how to do this.